Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Wiam Nemu, and my guest today is Matthew Howard. Hello, Matthew.
Hi,
Matthew,
thanks for having me.
thank you for joining us. Matthew is joining us from Australia. It's noon right now where you're at, and it's nighttime here. So thank you for making the time.
No problem.
So Matthew is a seasoned communications professional, is executive producer of Common Home TV. He focuses on digital storytelling that bridges faith, social justice, and contemporary issues. His work brings the principles of integral ecology and inclusive church teachings to life, reaching a broad audience through accessible, high quality media. So I just had the pleasure of watching your documentary about that's called Learning to Serve in the Face of Terror, which Archbishop Warda tells Archbishop Warda's story. Now, the one question is, what inspired you to create this documentary, and how did you come across meeting Archbishop Warda?
I guess we could start about the interesting part about the story is how I got to meet him. I was working away in Melbourne, and he was in Melbourne. And by the time that I figured he was here, he had already moved it to Sydney. So put that into perspective. That's sort of like Montreal to Philadelphia, a drive. So I had a baby daughter, and we jumped in the car, my wife, I, and the kid, and we drove up to Sydney. I got on the horn. We sorted out a time to meet. It was the wildest ride. I blew my car engine on the way up. Like imagine like being in the Australian outback out near our beautiful Geelong Retreat Center, St. Clements. And my wife had just started cutting my hair, so I had this really terrible haircut. And I showed up, and I met this man who absolutely like just blew me away. You could tell just by his presence. A Redemptress here mentioned how he just looked like he was loved as a child. Like he just brings this affection to such a dark time. Now, I guess your other question was what made me want to tell the story. I guess one of the most important things in my professional career, because Kingdom TV is a mission of the Redemptress, right? So the Redemptress of Australia, the Redemptress of Oceania, comprises countries within Oceania and a vice province in Asia, two vice provinces in Asia. We have throughout the world, a deep commitment to peacemaking. There would might not be an overstatement to say that we wouldn't have peace in Northern Ireland if it wasn't for Father Alec Reid. He was there holding meetings in the back of the church with both sides of the sectarian conflict, bringing people together. That's something that's always been etched in my memory. But even more recently, Father Pix, God rest his soul, his work against Duterte's crime. I did a documentary on Brother June, who would go out and take photos, and I went with him, take photos of the dead bodies of the extrajudicial killings and bring them to light for people to see. Um, Bishop Warda is a continuation of a redemptive spirituality that I admire deeply, right? So this has him equipped through being formed in taking care of the marginalized uniquely for this. So I really wanted to tell the story, not only because it was at the time when I filmed it 10 years ago, and it's been sitting on, and there's reasons for that. That was the impetus. That was my burning thing, was to get closer and to be playing obviously a very, very extremely small part in supporting telling this story, because in the wounded world we live in, this is something we really need to hear, and the secular world needs to hear it as well, because the misinformation around what is the Catholic Church, what is the Catholic Church is, that we're one faith, one church, but from Roman Catholic to Ukrainian Catholic, there's just so much misinformation and not understanding at present. And I think there's a brilliant way to bridge that gap. It's something Common Home TV strives to do.
So tell us, what is this interesting story that caught your attention that you wanted to focus on?
Well, I think that it was a really sensitive topic to bring up, because how do you tell that story? You don't want to miss. It's not something. It was a pressure for me to tell the story personally, because you can't put out a bad product on that. It's like making a movie on the Holocaust. It's difficult for the storyteller too, because it's easy to pull strings. It's the Holocaust, right? It's this horrible thing. But I wanted to do this justice, this story of my faith, and even not. He goes into the Yazidis, just waking up one morning. Imagine waking up one morning, and as he puts it in the documentary, he kind of heard some things, and then waking up one morning and there's just hordes. I guess hordes is a terrible descriptor, but just masses of people coming in and saying, "We need your help." Uh, and then having the wherewithal to say, "I got this." And I think that it's very telling that he was able to say, "I got this." And I think that comes from a redemptorist spirituality of always working with the marginalized. And that's something it's a daily thing, right? The marginalized doesn't need to be taking care of everybody in Iraq during, the monstrous events that happen.
This
The
is,
most
during, this is
marginal.
right after the 2014 ISIS attack, correct? And
Yes. So this was
but
he was he was
he was
he.
living there.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so for just a little bit of context, um, yeah, he woke up one day and Mosul fell, and they walked over. So it's about an hour car ride, I believe. And he woke up, and Mosul said, "No, this is our territory, right? This is an Islamic State." And he woke up, and he had people of all faiths in the region, so to come and help him. And then when he was there during the siege in Sinjar with the Yazidis, when they were being genocided, and he defended them heroically at that time as well. So Catholic meaning universal, he was there for everybody at every step of the way.
And when you
From
watch
the start.
when I watch the documentary, the way he speaks, he's so simple. He's like, "Well, this is what we have to do. It's like what we have to do. We have to protect everybody. We have to welcome everybody." The way he talks so simply about it, it doesn't even you don't even imagine the horrendous situation that he was in, because all he was thinking about is helping people.
Yes, and I think that goes back to, like, I think that's something, like, really intrinsic in his personhood. Like I said, like, the things that he's seen and he's been with, and he's still able to make little smiley faces and be this calming presence. Whereas I know I wouldn't have it within me. My brokenness would show through. Speaking of that constantly, but then other times when he needs to, he speaks very. And I think I think that goes back to a redemptress way of he's theologically very, he's very highly educated, but being able to put those into simple, very easy to understand things of producing, of like why we do this, why this is essential to our faith. I think that comes across really well. I think he did an exceptional job in explaining that. So it brings us right up to, we released on the 10-year anniversary. So as we all know, the fall of ISIS exists, but that's not the fall of really the end of anything. I think that we have these notions in our head that's like, well, and that's not. What's going on there is still those traumas are generational. And until we understand that, we can't be wiping our hands of this situation.
So we were talking before this interview, and this is exactly what we're talking about, the trauma that keeps going, that allows a repeat and a continuation and a pattern of violence that continues to happen in Iraq, because it's like one person kills another, or one group hurts another, and then there's a trauma, and then when you don't deal with it, and when you don't heal, and when you don't address it, then there's this tendency to continue this pattern. And what is important about your work is that this is a way of addressing it. It's a peaceful way to address it. You're discussing it, you're talking about it. Now, one thing that I liked when I was watching his story, he said that he has put a lot of effort into speaking with Islamic scholars and, addressing this in a factual, heart-to-heart way, and being honest about it. How do you feel about that? And what did he express exactly? What was this honesty that he was talking about?
Oh, I think his choice of words off the cuff could not have been scripted by a professional scriptwriter. I think he said something along the lines of, "We need to address to our brothers and sisters Muslim that this is a cancer that needs to be addressed." And by opening it up with our brothers and sisters Muslims and talking about the need for our cordiality, but at the end, there's an underlying thing that needs to be addressed. It's really to the point. It's pointed, and it says that this is something, and he also makes the correct diagnosis that this is something that's hurting you more, right? I remember when I was living in Montreal, and originally from Montreal, maybe 23 years ago, listening to Pervez Musharraf in an interview, and speaking about the 9/11 attacks and saying, the obviously tragic, but like we are going through that type of terrorism in Pakistan all the time. The numbers of deaths, right? It's you have to realize what's happening in that region, the number of deaths, and it's Muslims, right? So when we talk about addressing it, it's not just for our own safety. He's saying this because of his love for his brothers and sisters Muslims, people who are around him, people he sees as people of the book, people that he meets with regularly, who he's had before this really good relationships with and built relationships with. So for him to say that in the way in which he said it, I think is very poignant, and to have the courage to say it in the midst of all this. And I'd like to speak to his courage just in case this doesn't come up again. Like, if this was me, when the camera stopped rolling and I was like, "So you're going back?" He's like, "Yep." And I was like, "No, I don't know. If that was me, I'd be like, I can raise money here. Maybe I go to Rome. Oh, Paris might be nice. They might get some money in Paris. New York, come on. There's Catholics in New York." No, he was going back to his people, right? And that to me is it cannot be overrepresented. Now, one thing that we didn't get to do because of the brevity, right? It's only a 20-minute video. Common Home TV, check it out. It's still on the homepage. One thing we didn't get into, though, if we're going to speak about the need to speak to the Islamic scholars and speak directly, our peacemaking tradition in Ireland, someone reached out to me and said he wasn't comfortable with the word terror, right? And you think ISIS, clearly, right? Obviously, terror is their main business. And he was speaking as a Catholic who lived through the Troubles. And he was saying, we were terrorized by our colonizers. Now, I chose that word and I stick with it because those words are, if someone comes and colonizes and then someone, reacts in a way that is obviously clearly beheading, like the savagery which was, it's not to diminish the savagery. Those words are going to become new words, but they'll still really mean the same thing, right? No matter how the resistance is sort of played out. But obviously the more violent end is going to have a more of that connotation. But if we really wanted to speak about, that situation too, we'd have to take into consideration the invasion. George Bush is still throwing out baseballs at the baseball games in the United States, and Australia was there as well. So it's not just blame America. But if we really wanted to look at like the underlying and wanted to speak about the political, the consequences of war are still being felt globally. People don't trust institutions. People don't trust the media. Well, they sent how many citizens to die in a war where in the end there was democracy, weapons of mass destruction, goalposts changed quite a bit. So if we're looking at, how are we settling things and trying to understand contextually, I think that it needs to be a bit broader, and it's something that we couldn't address in scope in the documentary itself. So we really just focused on his particular story, his particular handling of it, his onus of social justice and the gospel in the midst of what really just ended up on his doorstep.
Yeah, I think most people that have that were born in Iraq, there's a connection to the people there that unless you were born there, you don't understand it. I was born in Baghdad, and my husband was also born in Iraq, and he still has a group of his college friends. They're all Muslim. He's the only Christian that stayed connected. And so there's the word brothers and sisters. It's because when you grow up with people that you grow up like family, regardless of what's happening, you still can't disconnect those feelings from the people. My best friend as a child was a Muslim Kurdish little girl that was affected by Saddam's regime, for instance. So Muslims were just as affected. When the 2003 war was traumatizing, even, of course, what ISIS did was traumatizing, but even the 2003, when we were seeing what was happening to our birthland, that was traumatizing as well. Watching that from here and feeling helpless, like you can't do anything. So any type of violence, any type of war, it does not lead, to something good. But what does help is being honest in the conversation. And that's what I appreciated about the documentary. Archbishop, when he's talking, that he's coming from a place of love and experience. He's not coming from a place that he's not trying to create conflict. There's no animosity in his voice or anything. That's really what I loved. And then I was able to listen to him because of that. I was able to listen to what he was trying to get across because of that. And which brings me to the next question, is that what message do you hope audience will take away from the film, regarding the role of faith communities and humanitarian efforts?
Um, I think that there's a special aspect there, right? Like, so in times of crisis, you'll see a lot of people who are maybe agnostic or maybe not devout in any like pious way turn to God, right? So it's they're God moments. In this type of terror, you're dealing with a God moment. So was he excellent? Was he, well, just unimaginably proficient at sorting out aid and humanitarian aid in a non-sectarian way? Absolutely, he was. But I think that when you look at it also in those moments, like I was saying, the moments of Christ, the moments of God, the extra effect of having it done by people of faith, like you said, who see brothers and sisters Muslim, who have a pastoral eye for God being there at that moment. I think that's a very important thing, and all credit in the world go to all the aid agencies which sacrifice themselves to be there. But I think it's a very special thing when you provide, not just people places to pray, but I think those are also moments of genuine encounter between God and ourselves, God in our relationships, and God in our relationships with people who share different faiths than us, and sometimes perhaps no faith at all.
And where can people watch this? I know you briefly mentioned the link where they can watch it, but can you please repeat that again?
Yeah, it's just down at the bottom. You can see Common Home TV. It's just that Common Home, then period TV. Um, yeah, so it speaks to, a common place for really good Catholic content, and we try to provide it in a way that can impact a Western audience. So a lot of times our symbols are sacred, obviously. It's not anything like that, but replicating what's sometimes not drawing people to church symbolically or linguistically needs to be presented in a modern way without obviously losing, what we're there for, the gospel and the goodness and the social justice that underpins the deepness of the tradition and faith.
Yeah, and I'm so glad this documentary was made, and you said like it was in the 10-year anniversary, but often we do feel that the Chaldean community, the Yazidis, the Assyrians, are marginalized group that their story seems like it happened and it was done with, but it's not addressed enough.
Yeah,
Holocaust is repeated, which yes, certain stories should be repeated. Sometimes I think like we need to heal and get past them and not just kind of go over and over again with it. But I feel with this particular story, I don't feel like there has been enough said about it, because it kind of feels like sometimes it's swept under the rug. And part of it is because people think that is the way to heal and just get past it. That's not how the Christians feel. That's not how the minorities feel about it, that sweeping it under the rug is the way to go about it.
no, it's absolutely not. What I would suggest people as well, please come visit Common Home TV. Um, we have an interview much like the one we're conducting right now that I did with a Palestinian Christian. whose family was in the church where Israeli snipers focused in and shot two women, one going to the bathroom, one going to care for her mother on the floor. Now, he speaks about the trauma and the recurring trauma. And he talks about, he doesn't say the Palestinians have like post-traumatic stress. They have like just constant stress, constant trauma. And the people that are in Hamas leadership right now, like that terrorist organization was bred from being terrorized themselves. And you don't break that cycle can be broken without better peace making traditions, right? But also why I think that relates very well to what we're speaking of now. I think we don't do a great enough job as a Christian church or as a Catholic church really talking about Christians in the Middle East. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this documentary as well. And when they speak, and if you do take the time to listen, which I hope you do, to this Palestinian Christian's voice, is saying that, somehow Christians are seen as caught in the middle or this third entity in sort of that conflict. Whereas, no, they're part and parcel, they're part of the land, they're part of the people. And I think you just sort of described that as well, how like you are you grew up with all of these people, calling them brothers and Muslims. Of course, we're not, we are part of the Iraq fabric. We share one faith, they share another faith, and we exist and we're there and we need your help. And I think that it's when you invade or when you're part of a place that's bombing Christians and you're from a Christian nation, it becomes uncomfortable. But that's a reality that needs to be. We need a better job showcasing that Christians are there, Christians are in need. And if you see the work of Bashar, it's clearly that he's passing that on too. That the buck doesn't stop there. He talks about his work with the Yazidis. He talks about how everybody was treated the same, how there was absolutely no preferential treatment. It's universal acceptance. So I think
Yeah,
that's something that we could do a better job at.
yeah, I did enjoy, every time he repeated that was his main focus. I wanted to ask you that, given that you probably do a lot of similar projects, but how did this particular project personally affect you that in a different way than maybe others? Or what did you
You
learn
know,
specifically from it?
well, a couple of things. I think what they call a charism, the Redemptorist charism, is particularly the standing with the marginalized and like those on the margins of society and church, and just be ready. Because what I took away from him was it just seemed like this was years of training for something he didn't want to happen, and there is fame that goes along with what he's done. He's known, he's regarded, all of that stuff, but it's not what he wanted. That's not, but no one knows when you're going to be sort of put into this sort of situation. So just take day by day, be mindful of that. Make yourself strong in case, God forbid, nothing remotely close ever happens in your life. But if you can contemplate on that, get involved with groups like the Redemptorists that sort of really, really hone in on that message. Just in case, we hope never. It's something that's sort of something that's stuck with me, is to keep it daily, because again, like he said, when he woke up that morning and people were there, it was go time. And I really think that's years of meditation, that's years of prayer, that's years of understanding yourself, that we're able to put that load. I mean, clearly I couldn't do it. Like that's not what that's not what I'm saying. I built her right away, but it's good to know that there's people you can emulate. There's people that you can look to in that for strength.
So, when I was watching the documentary, it reminded me, there was a book that I recently read. It was called Shall This Nation Die? It was written by Reverend Joseph Naim in 1915 during the Armenian genocide.
Mm.
And he was involved in that, and he documented everything, and he was able to escape that. And he ended up in 1920 going around the United States, bringing awareness about the Chaldean plight and their situation. And I remember when I read that, I ended up writing as simpler because it was written in it was published in 1920 or 21, and it was, just the British uh, style, and it was very heavy. So I simplified it, but I had to study it so much. And one thing that I realized, that it was so important for him to document the story, to document what happened, but there was such courage inside of him, and there was such patience, and he was very young. He was a lot younger than Archbishop Warda, but their spirit continues to live and inspire even years and years later, and so he listening to the story reminded me of that here he is, what he endured, and his thinking of trying to help people, and here you are capturing his story, because that's what God does. He'll bring these stories in order that he touches our hearts and to kind of try to resemble them somehow.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Geez, that makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
That's
Oh
that's
yeah, it
that's
was
the goal. That's the point, right?
beautiful.
That's
I was so touched. Like, at one point it's painful to like confront that, in some scenes where he was abused, and I'm reading that, and I normally don't like to read things like that, but it wasn't that I liked reading it, but I felt it was so important to read what this person, he suffered, and he went through this, and he documented it, not as a writer, but as a humanitarian, so he can help the world, make the world a better place, so these things don't happen. That was his whole thing. And then traveling here to share his story. But so given this wonderful work that you do, tell us, what project are you currently working on right now?
So when you look at the marginalized, we are currently doing a documentary in Burke, New South Wales, which is, I mean, a lot of Australians probably wouldn't know it either, but it's a very small outback town in New South Wales where I recently had the privilege to join Redemptorist Priests up there and shoot some video. They are maybe, I don't want to underestimate, we're 13, 15, and 25 parishioners type thing. And, the contrast there, this isn't really a contrast. It's going out. And that was what St. Alphonsus Liguori, the founder of the Redemptorists, when he makes this congregation, it was to go out to those in the field, those sort of marginalized. And you see a lot of beauty there too. So it's not really necessarily a social justice thing, but it really falls in line with the Redemptorist Charism really well. But I would really want to shout out Father Mans, a Redemptorist priest who's he's a partner of Common Home TV producer, and he will be putting out a 20-minute documentary on racism in Ireland. He was there doing one or two master's degrees, and one of them was in digital storytelling. So we'll be putting that out in December. Racism in Ireland. He did an excellent job. It was really, really, really well done. It's done in partnership. He was interviewing people with Amnesty International, and it should get another big release. That'll be the next social justice sort of thing we put out on the site.
I love your work. I mean, I'm a filmmaker too, so I totally believe like in the power of storytelling, and getting these stories, and especially of real people. There's nothing like, I don't even know why people do fiction, because there's such good stories out there of people that are doing really heroic things and important things. We have 1 minute left, and what last words that you'd like to share?
Um, I mean, I just do a shameless plug and say, come check out commonhome.tv. You can find us there. We have a prayer community daily, Bread for Today. If you have any websites, we can put a script so that you can get those sites using the prayers every day. We release content all the time. You can follow us on all our socials. We have Instagram, YouTube, the website, Facebook, the usuals. No, I guess that's about it. I think that's really that's all we're up to right now. But we're going into Christmas
That's
here.
quite a lot.
16 years, and I'm still getting used to the hot Christmases. And we'll be releasing a song on 150 digital platforms with some priests and some lay collaborators together, doing like an Australian summer. So it'll be a hot country style song. We're looking forward to it. Father Oche is incredible guitarist, like
That,
shredder.
that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it should be.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks everybody for watching. If anybody noticed, I have just lost my voice a little bit. So, but
One
everybody,
more thing, if you ever want to be in touch, sorry, if you ever want to be in touch, please reach out on social media. I'd love, any of our forums, you can direct message us, we can respond to you. The idea was to continue this into a podcast form to go deeper in depth, but we need people that have roots in Iraq, that have contacts in Iraq. If that's something that you'd be wanting to be involved with, hey, let me know.
sorry, what was the podcast? What you mean, like
Yeah,
the?
so we were thinking of retelling this story a little bit more in depth in a podcast variety. So, like maybe making a 6-point part series where this was only a short 20-minute documentary, but we'd like to look into specific stories, specific impacts, specifically what the whole context on these.
Matthew, how are you going to forget telling me that? That's like,
Because well, because it's always been
just
something
give me
kicking around in the head.
credit.
Because it was shelved. It's not a roller coaster. It's not a ride. So we've had a lot of things
It
come
doesn't
in and out
matter. I mean,
on
the
TV. Yeah,
story,
but that's
100 years of
silly of me.
time,
My
the
bad.
100
Because
years
it
of
has to come.
really, like the
I'm hearing
100,
myself now.
when I'm reading Joseph Nine's book, which somebody in Iraq mentioned to me, and I couldn't believe, as somebody who reads so much and thought I was so familiar with the stories from back in Iraq, I had no clue. I just discovered him last year, and I thought, oh my God, thank God for books, thank God, for this documentation. So whatever you're doing is so incredibly important, no matter how long it takes. It's very, very important work.
Well, if anybody does have media contacts in Iraq and would like to be interested, we're not saying that we're going to do it. It's just something that we kicked around with a couple of guys. We were talking about it. We said, this could be a really good podcast story because you can't podcast everything. ISIS, they don't release their footage. It wasn't like I could write to somebody. I had to steal from them. Hopefully they're a forgiving lot.
You're forgiven.
But the podcast, to have people tell the story, um, uh, we would need significant input from people that are in Iraq or have ties to Iraq or would be willing to partner with us to make it. So I don't know, just
Well,
reaching
good
out
luck.
to
I mean,
anybody
yeah,
listening
just you're putting it out there, and good luck with that, and good luck
part
with
of the
all your
universe.
projects. I hope they find many, many blessings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone. Good night. Bye-bye.